As we have discussed many times, over the last 4 years, a lot of people didn't feel like maybe they could speak up, stand out, challenge the orthodoxy within their school district, their local, state, federal government, university. But what they could do is vote for Donald Trump to send a message to those intolerant types that lord over those institutions I mentioned. And that's what they did. And we mentioned a bit earlier in the program, there are some center left that want their party to return to something like it was, sort of have a DLC sort of reform, like after the Dukakis catastrophe that gave rise to Clinton and 2 terms. But they see the same things that we see, which is, as Larry Sabato actually put it, shockingly, I don't find him usually insightful, although it doesn't take much insight to offer this description. It is so patently obvious. Larry Sabato, the party, the Democrats, as a whole, has become intolerant of ideological diversity in its ranks. Democrats are far too left on many social issues and insist their candidates check all of the boxes, whatever the electorate as a whole may want. Democrats are even in worse shape than all these factors suggest. After the 2030 census, they'll lose more electoral votes and House seats. Well, thus the open borders importation effort. I digress. With the Democratic Party's collapse in rural states, it's difficult to find a way for the party to secure a Senate majority without any staying power. Unless Democrats get religion on all of this and decide to let 1,000 flowers bloom with nominees that fit their states and districts, as well as candidates who are not expected to fall in line on every social issue, the future really doesn't look particularly bright for the party. No, it does not. And to the extent that Rahm Emanuel saying that boys and girls are different is some sort of momentous statement within that party's power circles says a lot about that party and why it is in even worse shape than it was in 2020, even in worse shape in 2025 than it was in 2024. And also, they can't really get rid of Biden and Harris from popping up here and there into the public domain, which isn't helping anything. But just on terms of the issues of where they are and how unrelenting they are, they're getting louder, not more thoughtful. Are you not hearing me? Let me introduce you to Jasmine Crockett. Are you not hearing me? Let me introduce you to AOC. Are you not hearing me? Let me introduce you to Sarah McBride, the man pretending to be a woman who's a member of Congress now from Delaware. Of course he is.
I think you are kind of seeing an attempt to course correct from some prominent Democrats. Like Rahm Emanuel was recently asked by Megyn Kelly whether a man could become a woman, and he said no. Gavin Newsom recently said that he believes transgender athletes shouldn't compete in women's sports. Do you worry about an overcorrection here?
I do believe that those statements have been overcorrections, yes. But I also believe that and look, I don't want to also question the authenticity. I mean, I don't know the motivations for some of those comments. I don't want to question the authenticity of those beliefs. If those are their authentic beliefs, people can have a conversation. But I don't believe that is the place we need to go. Republicans are the ones that are obsessed with this issue. And that's one of my gripes with sort of the Rahm's framing, is he perpetually accepts this notion that the Democratic Party is more interested in bathrooms than classrooms, and that's just not true.
No, what is true is, that is true actually, but what it is true in addition, per that exchange between McBride and Dasha Burns, is when you can't acknowledge what is the simple truth, then you lose credibility. You come across as not moored to terra firma. When you don't know what a woman is, you can't define one, it's sort of a conversation ender. Mayor Pete making the rounds too, trying to buoy his presidential ambitions, I suppose. Trying to parse the boys and girls sports issue.
When President Trump says something like no boys and girls sports, which is a phrase that they use, it sounds like you're not signing on to that.
I think that chess is different from weightlifting, and weightlifting is different from volleyball, and middle school is different from the Olympics. So that's exactly why I think that we shouldn't be grandstanding on this as politicians. We should be empowering communities and organizations and schools to make the right decisions.
Chess is different than weightlifting. I can see the point. But this is where, again, when you eschew common sense, you just lose all credibility to have to generate consideration on anything. Certainly political support. Yeah, we all know that chess is different than weightlifting, Mayor Pete. What we're all talking about is boys and girls playing the same sport, boys competing against girls in girls' sports where they clearly have a innate physical advantage. Innate physical advantage. That's what we're talking about. That's what everybody who's sane is talking about. And you're trying to parse the issues with rhetorical sleights of a tongue to appeal to these constituencies that you're tethered to. And those sorts of answers that you heard from McBride and Mayor Pete tell you everything that you need to know about where that party is at present. For more on this and the first 6 months of the Trump administration, on the positive side too, not just obsessing about our opponents, but the contrast is important. Danielle Alvarez joins us. She is a senior advisor for the Republican National Committee. Danielle, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning. It is great to be on with you.
I know you want to accentuate the positives, and we'll certainly do that. But I mean, it's important to understand this dynamic between the two parties because, as we've discussed on this program, oftentimes, for a long time, and this Trump really changed this to his credit, there were a lot of Republicans that were very skittish about addressing what were considered social or moral issues. And it was to their detriment. And Trump, particularly after last year's performance, has really brought that point home.
Listen, I am happy to do both and bash on Democrats over a morning cup of coffee. Let's talk about what an embarrassment this Democrat Party is. And I think you highlighted it perfectly in the lead to this segment. They have no leader. They have no winning policy to drive. They have no message, and you said it perfectly. They are bringing out the Bernie Sanders, the AOC, the Jasmine Crockett. Wait a second, that's been a disaster. Maybe we go back to Nancy Pelosi. We just saw the disaster that was Cory Booker's childish meltdown on the Senate floor. They are all trying to elevate themselves, as you use the word buoy themselves, to become the new leader of the Democrat Party. The problem that they have is the contrast with the Republican Party. When we won majorities in the House, the Senate, the White House, the popular vote, growing with every demographic across the country, we were forced to lead and govern well. So that's the contrast. Democrats who are rudderless, who are embarrassing themselves with childish antics across the country, and Republicans who are leading well. We have a secure border. The border is enforced. Criminals are being deported. We have fairer trade. We have record-setting tariff revenue. GDP and the economy is outperforming. America is back, baby, and it's under President Donald Trump and Republican leadership.
What's your perspective, with this latest document that was released as foreshadowed over the last weekend by John Ratcliffe, the Durham annex, the annex from the Durham report, declassified, released, that again provides more substantiation to the truth of the matter, which is that there was an orchestrated effort by the Obama White House and the Hillary Clinton campaign to manufacture a Russian collusion story to derail a presidency. Also, as has been pointed out from some of the contents of that Durham annex, it also provided this lie about critical infrastructure being compromised by the Russians was also used as the predicate to set up the censorship industrial complex under Biden as well. I mean, so we start to get the truth and the evidence to support the case. And yet I think it's still going to feel very unsatisfying to a whole host of Trump voters if there isn't some sort of reckoning, individual reckoning, perhaps criminal, to some of these bad actors that have now been exposed as having been bad actors for the better part of the last decade.
And the reality is, unfortunately, there's many of us who have known that these are bad actors. And the mainstream media and the legacy media has promoted these Russia collusions. I mean, we all knew that they were lying about the Hunter Biden laptop. I'll tell you a personal story. I was a senior advisor on the Trump campaign. I remember when we were directing our rapid response team on the communications front to put videos of Joe Biden unable to string sentences together, breathing like he did on the CNN debate, unable to walk off stage. And I'm not one to typically shout at reporters, but having a screaming match with a New York Times reporter who was telling me that our team was manipulating video and that Karine Jean-Pierre had dubbed this a cheap fake. I think our nation is sick and tired of being lied to, is sick and tired of the legacy media carrying the water of the deep state. And I think you're exactly right. We need to have a reckoning. We need to have truth because we now know that this Russia was a hoax. We've been now dealing with it for nearly a decade plus, and we have to make sure to hold individuals accountable. That's what this administration is doing. They want to bring truth to light. They want to make sure that the American people, who for a long time were a silent majority and no longer, know the truth so that we can put that behind us and focus on policies that will uplift American families, American businesses, and help benefit us all.
Now, I mean, some of the critiques that Trump has endured from people who are erstwhile his supporters, myself included, are in the areas of trade policy, in the areas of spending policy. Let's talk about spending just for a second. You know, the Doge thing was such an innovation because it wasn't just another blue ribbon reinventing a government commission. It was really an attempt to begin a culture change that will have to be sustained for years in order to be effective, and to unleash cabinet secretaries and agency directors like Lee Zeldin over at EPA to do the good work that they're doing, on their own, spontaneous order, independently, parallel tracks. So there's a lot of good that's happened there, but the big beautiful bill was not exactly a testament to fiscal conservatism. And now we have the unveiling of plans for a new White House ballroom at a time when I think everybody would acknowledge we're collectively spending beyond our means, and we have been for a long time. I mean, is that really a good look in what is supposed to be a Doge era to be talking about upgrades to the White House for hosting events?
Here's what I'll say is the One Big Beautiful Bill is probably the most conservative piece of legislation, at least in my generation, if not ever. It made permanent the president's tax cuts, which greatly benefits the American people. Let me say it in the inverse. Every single Democrat voted to increase our taxes. Republicans made sure that we got no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and that we made permanent President Trump's tax cuts of the first administration. It made permanent President Trump's border security. Now, this type of bill couldn't make permanent by law Doge cuts, and that's why you're seeing Congress bring up rescission packages to make sure that we can make those Doge cuts permanent. Because one of the things we have to remember, first of all, it's been about 6 months since the president was sworn in. I think sometimes we forget because we have been moving at about 100 miles an hour, but it's only been 6 months since the president was sworn into office. We are cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. The president has done it through executive order. The president has fought liberal judges from the bench, because we know that Democrats like to weaponize the judicial system. And now, and this really is a challenge to the Republican Party, to our own party, Congress has to act, because what we can't have is 4 years of good leadership, but as soon as a new president is elected, everything is undone. We need to make sure that Congress codifies all of these cuts, that we get our rescission packages passed, that we permanently cut waste, fraud, and abuse, because we know what can happen. During the 45 administration in 2016, President Trump secured the border with a stroke of a pen, and Joe Biden undid it all with a stroke of a pen.
Right.
We cannot have that, and it really, truly is a challenge for Congress to make sure that these DOGE cuts are made permanent, that we have full fiscal responsibility, because as we approach the midterms, which are still a year and a half away, good governance is the only way that we are going to be successful, because it is the mandate that the American people gave us.
Right. I mean, I definitely agree with you in terms of Congress needs to act. And if we're being honest with ourselves and our party, we've got a narrow majority, particularly in the House. And we've got, a couple of handfuls, probably, maybe more, of Republicans in both caucuses that are not offended by government spending. That, let me just be polite about it. And so it's problematic to try to get the structural reforms. I think anybody who's serious about reducing the size and scope of expensive government has to engage. I mean, all the money is spent on those big social welfare, social engineering systems. And at some point, somebody's going to have to provide the leadership to generate a conversation about a framework, how these things go in D.C., to rethink how we do big entitlement programs where most of our money is spent because, because they're unsustainable in our current trajectory. And I know people don't want to do it before the midterm, and then people don't want to do it before the presidential. Well, there's always an election around the corner. So at some point, somebody's going to have to provide the leadership. And if Congress doesn't, then maybe the president will. What do you think?
Well, I think that it absolutely has to happen, and that's why the president created DOGE. That's why we have saved, billions, trillions of dollars. But the president is focused through these DOGE cuts. I mean, we all have heard the great cuts that happened to USAID. It's funny how Democrats and the DNC can't fundraise anymore. Now that USAID has been cut by DOGE. But the reality is that the president is pulling several levers at once. Not only are we cutting funds, but we are also pulling levers to make sure that we are bringing more money into our economy and into our country. The first being through tariffs. I mean, Democrats said that tariffs wouldn't work. Well, we now know that $150 billion has come in as a result of tariffs. It's actually historic. Normally, if an administration can negotiate one trade deal, that's a win. 2 trade deals, oh my goodness, 3 trade deals, unheard of. The president is negotiating with 90 countries at once. In fact, last night, very late last night, he gave 7 more days to countries who haven't come to the table. Well, that's bringing in right now an estimated $150 billion into the economy, which the president has toyed with the idea of providing a rebate. We could certainly pay down debt with those funds. I know the president will be very thoughtful in how he uses those dollars. But we also have a lot of money coming in because we're pulling levers on the economy, right? There was really high income growth this week. There was 3% GDP growth. Our consumer price index dropped all the way down to 2.1%. So we're seeing great success financially, economically in the first 6 months of this president's administration. And let's be very honest, there were a lot of naysayers that said that this couldn't be done. So I know I'm an eternal optimist, but I am very hopeful and I am very optimistic about the future and the direction of our country. And under President Trump's leadership, we have seen the way he was able to whip votes for the one big, beautiful bill. I think that we are all going to work together to get our fiscal house in order.
Danielle Alvarez is a senior advisor for the RNC, Republican National Committee. Danielle, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me. Thank you for having me.
Yep. And she joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
A large retail store just canceled a huge order, leaving MyPillow with a ton of extra MyPillows. But you know what? That's their loss and your gain. MyPillow is offering the Classic Collection for wholesale